Okay, welcome to Wayne's World Garage. Today, we're going to continue troubleshooting the Dodge Power Wagon 230 cubic inch engine and figure out why number 6 cylinder is not firing. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe. So let me see what we got in here. So interesting, this cylinder has not been firing for a while. I'm looking at the intake side of it and it's very clean. So I've had a problem for a little while, didn't know it apparently. The other ones look all right. Well, that's kind of interesting, which would indicate to me the valve's not opening and closing or something. But until Paula cranks it over, we won't know. Okay, so here's the dealio. This valve should be tight in here and it's not. If I can wiggle it back and forth, it tells me something's not right. And my guess is the valve adjustment is off, and that is the intake valve. So need to adjust that and see what's going down here. Unfortunately, that's not a 5-minute job, but we'll get it done. Thank you. Yes.
Here, I can record you.
What's that?
I'm recording.
You don't want to record me, I'll be swearing. All right, well, here's where we're at with this guy. Somewhat amusing, as long as it's not your truck. As you recall, I pulled the head off without too much drama, actually, and I don't believe I wrecked too much. And sadly, or a good thing, I don't know which way you look at it, the cylinder head gasket was just fine, but still no compression in cylinder number 6, closest to the firewall. As it turns out, they're solid lifters, and the valve lash adjustment was such that the intake valve was not closing all the way. And when the intake valve doesn't close all the way, we can get suck, squeeze, bang, and it didn't blow. So then what you do is you remove this fender splash pan and the wheel, okay? And that's not a big deal. You can do it pretty safely, I believe. And then you take a look at the valves, and now you can look at the valves and see what's going down here. Okay, so there you go. This might be better. Man, it's hard to see. Okay, now let me zoom in on it. Now, the hilarious thing is they expect you to adjust these valves when the engine's running. I don't know who can do that, but they're a better man than this guy, I'll tell you that. Plus, they're freaking nuts. I don't know how you do that in this truck. All right, so there we are, zoomed in a little bit, and I don't know if you can see that, but so as you can see, here's the exhaust, and you're supposed to put your hands down here when this freaking thing's running? That's ridiculous. So I did take off the exhaust pipe and the muffler, which is only a few bolts. And what I'm doing now is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the intake valve here. And if you look carefully enough, there is some scratch marks I put on there with a punch when I put it together. Because when I put it together, I knew it was loose. And the solution, we had the camshaft in. You know, we're not going to take the camshaft, and the engine's buttoned out. So you can't just remove the lifter. So that's a story, and I'm sticking with it. So what I'm doing is I will unscrew it a little bit more. It's unscrewed quite a bit. I will put some more Nash marks in it. And I'm thinking about maybe a little bit of red Loctite, some Loctite on there, high temperature Loctite, and see if that will probably stick my valves. I don't know. We'll figure something out, but that's what I'm doing. All right. So when you get ready to start adjusting your valves, you need to write this down. And what I do is what you want your intake valve to be, what you want your exhaust to be, and then the firing order, of course, which you all know is 153, 624, and then their position on the block. This is the firewall, this is a radiator, and that's the story. I'm sticking with it. But also, just to make it easy, is you need to take a little thing and figure out which one's exhaust, intake, exhaust, blah, blah, blah. The intake is a larger valve, the exhaust is a smaller valve if you don't know. And then what you gotta do is you gotta find top dead center for each cylinder. So the way I started, 6 was at top dead center, because that's the problem one. And I just did 6. Then the next one come up, of course, is number 2, if you look at the firing order. And then the next one come up is number 4. Okay, and after 4 is number 1. And I've got all those done, how about that? So next one up is number 5. So what you got to do is you bump the starter just a little bit, okay? And number 5 will come up, inshallah, with any luck. So let me do that. So number 5's at top dead center. And we look at carefully and make sure the valves are closed. And that seems to be a good thing, that the valves seem to be closed. So what do we do next? So next what you want to do is, where's the intake and where's the exhaust? I've shown intake left, exhaust right. And according to my logic, intake's a larger valve. So take a peek at that. Let's see here. Intake is on the left, and you can see it's larger. Exhaust's on the right, and they're both closed. So the next thing you gotta do is get in the hole. All right, so you can see some knucklehead decided to put this behind the exhaust manifold, which I am not taking off. So what I'm trying to do is reach the following 2 lifters. This one here and this one here. And oops, there we go. This is the intake, this is the exhaust. So the good news is they both are loose. So get your trusty feeler gauge, set it on 0.10 of an inch, and it should be a little bit snug. Real men did this when this thing was running. The reality is we do this when it's not running. So since we're not adjusting the valves when the engine's hot, the feeler gauge needs to be at 0.10 for the intake valve and somewhere 12 or 13 for the exhaust valve when it's cold. You want it a little bit more gap on the exhaust valve because that's going to expand more. What you don't want to do is have the valves not closing all the way when the engine's running, especially with the exhaust valve, because that's going to end up burning the valve and the valve seat. So that's what we're trying to do here. When you put the feeler gauge in, it's got to be a little bit snug, and that should be right. The good news is the rest of these valves, and all of them I checked, were all about 1/1000 over from what I initially had put them in at, which means they haven't changed. It wore in a little bit, and that's perfect. So this is tedious, but you take a 1/2 inch wrench, you take your 7/16 inch wrench, and then you adjust these guys. You have to hold the lifter itself with a 1/2 inch wrench, and the little adjusting thing going in the top. You adjust that in and out until it looks good, until it feels right, until the feeler gauge is just a little bit snug, and then that's where it ought to be. Tiny bit. That actually went. This is kind of slow and it's kind of tedious, but since I'm in here, I've got it this far done, you might as well do it. The interesting part is they really do recommend adjusting these valves while hot when the engine is running. And as you can see, the exhaust pipe is right there. So I don't know how you're supposed to do that. That's insane. But we do it when it's cold, and I really don't think it makes a whole lot of difference, really. It'll work out okay. There you go. I could still do a little bit more. What are the chances I can leave the feeler gauge in there and do this? Pretty slim, but we'll give it a shot. Whatever. So the problem is the adjuster for it, I can't get very snug because it should be snug when you put them together. So I'm working on it. I think what I'm going to do is try and lift up the valve some more, compress that, pull it out, and pull a valve up, then unscrew this thing entirely if I get enough room. We'll see. So here's the Storio. This is cylinder number 6. Intake valve is on the right, exhaust is on the left. Exhaust valve is fine. Intake valve, the lifter, which are solid lifters, the direct contact to the cam, came loose. Okay, and as you can see, as I spin this around in here, I don't know if you can see it that well. You probably can't see it on this thing, but it ended up when I built this engine, we knew there was an issue that these were loose, and the person who put the lifters in, not me, you know, should have caught that. We should have just replaced the threaded part. And I dinged the threads on it. You can see the threads have got little cuts on them. I don't want to do that anymore because I'm afraid it's going to hurt the internal part of these threads, and I'll have to end up taking the cam out. So I unscrewed it very far. I lifted up the valve as much as I possibly could, okay, mechanically, and I unscrewed it. I couldn't get it out entirely, which is kind of too bad. I thought I might be able to get it out. See how good this is? Thought I might be able to get it out. And then what I did is I cleaned the threads off thoroughly, okay, with acetone, and I put some Loctite on the threads and screwed it back together. There's a good picture of it there. This is just hard to get to. It's hard to see. So I checked it this morning. It's been almost 24 hours. I did a test sample on another bolt. It's pretty strong. And if it does break loose, there's still a lot of resistance. It's not like it breaks loose and it's free. To loosen these up, you got to heat them up to 250 degrees centigrade. So I'm pretty comfortable it'll work. I thought about some JB Weld on top of those threads. I don't like that in case it breaks loose. I thought about silicone. I think that's a waste of time. I don't want to get silicone inside the engine if that breaks loose. So I'm going to call it quits and wrap it up. Hilariously, take a look at this, guys. Here's a picture of what this thing looks like. You're supposed to adjust these valves. I already put the valve cover on the right side back on. You're supposed to adjust the valves when this thing's running. I don't know how. I don't know who the hell does that. If you can adjust these when the valve's running, and this coming down is the exhaust manifold. So the exhaust pipe is right there, which I took off to get some access to, which does help. If I took the manifold off, I'd get a lot more access, but still not a big difference. So we're going to start putting things back together, and let's hope for the best. So the next step here is starting putting stuff back together. So I put the exhaust on. I don't figure you want to watch that. Now what you got to do, though, is I took my thread chaser, and all of the holes, every one of them, has to be chased out, because when you put the cylinder block back together, you need to use high temperature, not regular temperature, high temperature thread sealed. Otherwise, it will leak out those threads. So, and the same with the intake and exhaust manifold down here. If you ever take this guy off, high temperature thread sealed. So I'm putting that back on, and I'm not done yet, but I started cleaning off the surface of the head, all the old gasket material. We don't use sealants on head gaskets, but I do spray the head gaskets with copper coat, as per my mentor. So what's going on now is I'm taking the cylinder head and I'm cleaning up the cylinder head, and I will check that when I am done. So I just take this little tool here. It's pretty cool, actually. Take this little guy here, and these are plastic, so it's like little scuff pads. And there you go. This is absolutely, positively critical you get this right, because if you don't make this cylinder head and the block clean, it will fail. So do a good job. All right, well, here we are after thoroughly cleaning the cylinder head and the block and checking the block. Now I'm putting the some of these studs back in. I sprayed the gasket entirely with copper coat. I don't know what good that is, but I do it anyway because they say to. I guess I follow directions, you know. So put a little bit of high temperature thread sealant. Use the right stuff, otherwise you'll be pissed when it doesn't work and you fail. Go over here, and what I didn't show you is I had a little bit of help. Thank you to my wonderful wife for putting in some of these guys, because this is a pain in the ass to put the get this thing started without wrecking it. And I'm just putting these hand tight now, and then we'll torque them down. So you go like that, make that snug, and then I will unscrew it some. And this works out pretty well. Loosen this up a little bit, and then pull it up tight, and then it just unscrews. Nice and easy, way easier than anything else you would ever do. It's an expensive tool because they sell them on Fleabay, but you know, if you're gonna do this type of work, you need some real tools. All right, let's get another one going. you know, make sure it's in all threads like that. See his pie. And then we get this guy going in here again. The way this guy works. Tighten the collet down. Screw it on. There we go. Now we just tighten it down here. This thing just works remarkably well. And these studs are here because starting to reassemble the engine, and the first thing that goes on are these studs that go into the front of the block, which hold the King Sealy governor on. So I assume this would bore the hell out of anybody watching me put stud bolts into the engine block. So I ended up putting this in fast forward and turning down all my comments. But there's not a whole lot of comments here. You do have to torque these down, but I put them on with a 3/8 ratchet first, and I just snug them down a little bit. So when you see me snugging them down, they're not cranked down yet. So don't get too excited. I'll go back and we'll retorque them all, of course. And just to double check, you all make sure every one of these bolts that go into the head and the side of the block, anywhere in the block, I use a Permatex high temperature engine sealant on. It seems to work well. In the past, I've taken a shortcut and not used high temperature thread sealant gasket. Sure as heck, it started leaking coolant. So make sure you use the high temperature stuff. That's important. So what I'm doing right now is torquing down the head bolts. And the finished torque for the head bolt's supposed to be close to 70 pounds, foot-pounds. So what I'll do, I'll start off like at 30, then do it again at 50, and then do it one more time. Bear in mind, where those little nuts are, okay, it's less. It's like 62 foot-pounds. So you don't crank them quite as hard. So I start off with a 3/8 inch torque wrench, and then I go to the 1/2 inch torque wrench, and it seems to do okay. All right, I should almost be switching over to the bigger torque wrench, but go for the next one. So we'll put these at 50. On the smaller ones, it says, those are the nuts on them, 52 to 57, so we're getting real close. So line it up here again, number one, right here. Two. Three. 4. 11. 13. 14. 16. 16. 17. 18. 7. Bigger torque wrench. There we are. That's all these guys at 50. Supposedly, now just for a quick test. All right, well, the next one, if you read this, according to this, use a torque wrench that capture is 65. The other one's at 52, so I'll go to 57 on all these guys now. And then I will, 57, yeah. Of course, if you do it 16 times, you probably have a little more leverage here. So. All right, oops. 57, 50, 60. There we go. Okay, I'll give it a click on this guy. Double check, 52 to 57. And I am about at 57. 1. Check on the right thing. These are little cap screws, so this is as tight as these guys get. So, guys, Okay, for your viewing pleasure, I got out a copy of my Chrysler book and took a scan of the document, which tells you how to tighten the head bolts and the order that they're supposed to be in. You got to do it right. So there you go. I hope you can use this thing. Okay, well, here we are. This will be the moment of truth to tell the truth. Okay, you ready to crank it, Paula? Let her rip, Tater Chip. Keep going, keep going. All right. Keep going a little bit more. That's good, that's good. That's what we want to see, 125 PSI. Thank freaking God. Whew. All right, now I can sleep. All right, so the next exercise is start putting stuff back together here. So let me put some spark plugs in. Check it on page 85. What have we got for the spark plugs? And it says spark plugs. Here we go. And it says gap 25 to 28. Resistor plugs 35. I don't know if these are resistor or not. Yeah, you know what they are. 35. So put them at 35 and crank them to 30 foot-pounds of torque. So, with that said, let me crank them to 30 foot-pounds of torque and send them to 35. Okay, well that wraps up episode 2 of the Power Wagon repair. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Part 3 is going to be putting everything back together and making sure this thing runs. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me what you like to watch or what you don't like to watch. Take care.